Kia ora, Nick. This is a reflection on a working group that I attended up at Homai campus. I was lucky to be invited to hear Florine Pillion-Kamsteg and Karen, the Deputy Principal of Ngabathong Special School, based on Lily Nielson's Active Learning in New South Wales. I'm sure you've already heard of Florine. She's from Bartimaeus, and she's a very lovely lady and very passionate about CVI. This really fits in well with Domain 6, as she talked about at Bartimaeus the way that they work with students with diagnosing CVI and creating plans is through an interdisciplinary team with educational professionals and medical professionals. The people on their diagnostic team include an ophthalmologic professor, an ophthalmologist, an orthoptist, an optometrist, a neuropsychologist, an educational psychologist, an early intervention teacher, and mainstream teacher. And she said they all worked together in a process that they're then able to diagnose something as CVI and then work with that child at their centre. So in terms of my own practice, I felt like it was such a huge relief that there is a model for diagnosing this, and that I'm not alone with my frustrations about referring students with CVI, or what is the process? Is there a process? Do we have a process in New Zealand for this? Because it just can feel a little bit like bits and pieces, which isn't that great, and I'm sure there's so many more students out there with this who are being misdiagnosed. So she talked about a definition of CVI, and she said that is an impairment of visual function, disorder or damage to the brain. It's not always objectifiable. Medical history shows cerebral injury is important. She said it's an umbrella term. You have to look at what is the problem. There can be high visual function and low visual function, so you might have really good visual acuity and visual fields, but somehow there's still limitations in daily life. Also she underlined with good visual acuity and visual fields or without. So that's kind of where a lot of the issues are that we're running into. So she used, over in Bartimaeus, they use a lot of diffusion tracking imagery as a really important assessment tool for imaging of the brain. And she said that plasticity of the brain is huge, and not just to look at the imaging, but what the child can do with what type of brain they currently have. Part of that umbrella term is that the problems are related to nature, place, damage, cognition, possibilities, motivation, alertness, attention, memory, emotions, language, and executive functioning. She said that children can often have difficulty. It's difficult for other people to understand what it's like to have CVI. It's really hard to know what does it feel like, what does it look like. So at Bartimaeus they invented a tool called the CVI Experience, and it shows how difficult it is how difficult visual processing is in the brain. What is their CVI? It's very individual, so that they can advocate for all their own needs. So I was really excited to see that, and hopefully looking forward to having a tool like that available in New Zealand. What was really awesome was that throughout the presentation, Florine got us to, she had ways of us experiencing what it was like for people with CVI. So at one point she had these really crowded images on the projector, which were kind of impossible for me to read. It was like having dyslexia, and I just thought, that would be so difficult. Then she also said selective visual attention So she said what she does sometimes is she has these prism glasses and a mirror test to experience what it's like, and it can be quite like disorientating. And then also like writing, like you have to write the words, but you have to use a mirror. You can only write using the mirror, and I was just like, oh, that was so confusing. And then we also had to do this other one where you had to listen to a song and count how many times it had the word fata or something like that. It was, I don't know, I think it was about 7 times. But you also had to decode words on so the words were all scrambled and you had to put them into the correct order. And it was really obvious that you could only do one thing at a time. Like you could either listen and count the words, or you could look and decode, unscramble the words. And she was just saying how that's what it's like for some children with CVI. It's like they can either do one, like they'll either listen or they'll use their vision, and often they choose the one, but often they choose auditory because it's less taxing to do that. So that gave me quite a good insight to that processing of visual, auditory, and even tactile. And then we had a speaker called Karen from Narberthong. It's a special state school in New South Wales based on Lily Nelson's active learning. It was really cool to see her presentation. They use a lot of Lily Nelson equipment and really advocate a hands-off, quiet environment, a lot of watching, observing and planning, play-based learning by doing, very reflective practice. And, their motto is, if you don't move, you can't learn. So it's really important that they're going from the passive to the active. They've also introduced yoga, gym, and hydrotherapy. And they found that they did that because it transfers well into the community and allows communication for their body. And they also have quite a few autistic students. So there's, being able to still with the yoga helps them to learn more about their bodies. They also have a sensory program, but it's not as strict as TACPAC, and smell and taste is also introduced. They have sailing, music and outings available at the school. With their communication program, they use a lot of music, and they also use the pod book, which is something that I'm quite familiar with from the 2 special schools that I've worked at. And one thing that I really liked was these things called the MFA tables, which are multifunctional sitting tables, and it's like a table that has a little bit of a ledge around the outside, and so students sit around it and they can be quite independent in moving their hands and the things don't come off the table. Like some people might call them sensory tables, but I thought, these are quite cool because they're almost like quite a large tray to contain things. Another thing that she noted was with their students that have CVI and complex needs in nature, when they're using a Lily Nelson little room, they quite often put black material, like a black background over the top of the Lily Nelson, and actually use like glow in the dark kind of things in the little room. And I thought, that's quite cool. That's really interesting. So that's something that I'd like to test out, or just eliminating some of that clutter out of the little room, because if you've got a little child and then you've got all these different things hanging down, I don't necessarily think that would be great. So I'm quite interested to do some observations with that and kind of combining the little room and doing a bit more research into CVI and how that kind of might come together. Just lastly, another note that I found interesting was that during one of the presentations, a speaker spoke about how often there can be like a pale optic nerve with students that have CVI, and I thought, that is really interesting, because that's kind of like another indicator that there could be CVI in a student that has normal optic acuity. Also, it was that, so a history of neurological insult is needed to be added to the definition of CVI. So again, if someone's had an accident, they're just all more clues that could be towards this diagnosis. So overall, I felt that it was a real privilege to be able to attend the working group. I think it's going to be an ongoing thing, and I've just finished my Braille exam, and so I'm a little bit tired, and this kind of just came the week after, and I feel like once I had a little bit of a break, I can have a deeper look back into my notes and reflect on it a bit more in-depthly. But so far, I still think that there's a lot of valuable things that I can take straight away to my practice. And, I'm looking forward to putting that into place.